Hello, my artists and friends. Today we are going to be learning about perspective, and also we are going to be reversing the perspective to create a room or a space in which it actually looks like you are inside of the room. And if you turn your paper when it's finished, it'll look like you are actually in the room looking around. It'll be really 3D. It'll be kind of like an optical illusion. It's gonna be sick. It's gonna be awesome. But first, we need to talk about what perspective is. Perspective is a drawing tool for artists to create the illusion of space on a flat piece of paper. For example, this drawing of a road with buildings on either side of it is using perspective. It is creating the illusion that this road is going way back into the space of the paper for miles and miles, when really it's all just an optical illusion. Using certain angles and making sure that things are getting smaller and smaller as they go back into space is creating the illusion that this flat work is actually 3D. Perspective also uses something called a vanishing point. The vanishing point is the spot where all of the lines are pointing to and where all of the objects in the picture are getting smaller and smaller and smaller until they finally disappear at the vanishing point. Now that we know a little bit more about perspective and what it's used for, we're going to add the cool layer of reverse perspective. That's when you draw the picture with regular perspective with a vanishing point, and then you take that picture and you pop it forward into three-dimensional space. It creates a really cool, like, fisheye effect, as you saw at the beginning of this video. And there is an artist out there in the world today who makes reverse perspective artwork for his job. And his name is Patrick Hughes, and that's him right there holding his three-dimensional canvases that he then paints one-point perspective artworks on. Here's another example of one thing that he painted using reverse perspective, and if you were seeing this in real life, you would be able to see the fisheye effect as well. We are also being inspired by the Renaissance artist Raphael and his very famous School of Athens painting. As you can see here, Raphael, all the way back in the 1400s, used perspective as well to create this scene that appears to go way back into space. So now that we know about perspective, reverse perspective, and we even have a couple of artists that are our inspiration for this project, let's get it started ourselves. The first thing you'll need is a white piece of paper turned the horizontal side-to-side direction and a long piece of cardboard. This cardboard is going to be a straight edge for you so that you can draw two lines from corner to corner of the paper, creating an X in the center. Once you're done creating the X that goes from corner to corner across your page, you will not need your long piece of cardboard anymore. What we need to do next is find a ruler with inch measurements, and we need to measure 2 inches inward from each side of the paper. So let's start with the left side. And the most accurate way to create a straight line that is parallel to the edge of the paper is by putting 3 dots. I found the 2 on my ruler, and I measured inward 2 inches from the side edge 3 times to make 3 dots. After I have the 3 dots created, I can connect them with the ruler and draw my line. Let's do the same thing on the other side. We're finding the 2-inch mark. We're going to line it up with the right edge of the paper, and we're going to mark a dot. Then scooch up a little bit, measure in 2 inches once again, and create dot number 2. And then we need another dot to make it super accurate and vertical. So we'll measure in a third time. Once we have the 3 dots, we can connect them with a ruler, and we will be ensured that this line is going to be perfectly vertical. It's not going to be diagonal or crooked. Now, these 2 spaces that we measured out on each side of the paper are what I call no man's land. We're not going to put any drawings there. We're not going to put any details in there, because once this project is all finished, it's going to be cut off. So what I want you to do is grab a Sharpie, and to remind yourself to not draw anything in these spaces, I want you to go ahead and draw a wiggly line on each side of the paper, filling up that 2 inches to let yourself know, hey, you don't draw here. The place on the X where the 2 lines intersect is going to be one of our vanishing points. So I drew that spot a little bit bigger so that I can see it. And then we're going to use the ruler once again to measure 2.5 inches out from the vanishing point, staying on the X. So I put the 0 of my ruler on the vanishing point. I measured down 1 leg of the X, 2.5 inches. Now let's do the second line of the X. Measure out 2.5 inches from the vanishing point, and I'll do the last 2 right now. And I'm marking 2.5 inches with a little dot on the X. After you've drawn 4 dots on the X's that are 2.5 inches away from the vanishing point, you're going to play a little game of connect the dots. You're going to use a ruler to connect all 4 of these dots, and it should create a rectangle in the middle of your paper. You might not have known it, but what you just drew is the back wall of your room or of your space. And to make that very clear, we're going to grab a Sharpie and we're going to trace that rectangle with black. And then we're also going to trace the 4 lines that shoot out from the rectangle out to the 4 corners of the paper. And notice I'm rotating the paper so that the line that I'm tracing is vertical to me. And I like to start from top to bottom with a vertical line. I have the most success drawing a straight line that way. Next, moving on, we need to add 2 more vanishing points. And to do that, we need to find the exact middle of this paper. Instead of measuring it out, we're going to take one side of the paper over to the left. We're going to match up the corners and edges, and then we're just going to press on the bottom edge and the top edge of the paper. Hi, kitty! And that's going to mark the exact center of the paper. So I didn't crease the paper all the way. I just did a little boop on the top and a boop on the bottom. And now you can see the center of the paper. And I marked it with a pencil just so I can really see it. Now we're going to grab our ruler, we're going to connect the dots at the top and bottom of the center of the paper with the vanishing point. That gives us our 3 dots to make sure it's perfectly vertical. And we're going to draw a very light line down the center of the paper. Next up, we need to measure out 2.5 inches along that center line away from the vanishing point and put a dot. Let's do one below the vanishing point by 2.5 inches and mark it with a clear dot. These 2 dots that you measured out from the center vanishing point are going to be your second and third vanishing points. Next up, we need to draw the sections that are going to be folded and glued. We're going to use our top vanishing point for this. We're going to use our ruler. We're going to connect the top vanishing point with the bottom left corner of this rectangle, and then all the way down to the bottom edge of the paper. So I've lined up my ruler, it's touching the top vanishing point and the bottom left corner of the rectangle, and I'll draw a straight line all the way down to the bottom edge of the paper. Next up, we need to draw another line, this time from the top vanishing point to the bottom right corner of the rectangle and down to the edge of the paper. So let's line up our ruler, connecting those 3 points, and then draw our straight line. Once you have that done, you should be able to see a triangle. Excellent. Rotate your paper so that it's upside down. And then we're going to use our final vanishing point to create another triangle. So I'm connecting the vanishing point to the bottom corner of the rectangle and down to the edge of the paper. Let's draw the other side of the triangle the same way, going from the top vanishing point to the bottom right corner of that rectangle and down to the edge of the paper. Excellent work. Luckily for us, the complicated measuring and drawing is basically over. The last thing I want you to do is find the skinny triangles that were created when we drew the big triangles. I'll trace them with Sharpie so that you can see. And what we're going to do is fill those as well with wiggly lines to remind ourselves that these parts are no man's land. We're not going to draw anything in these shapes. These are the parts that are going to be cut and folded to create the pop-out picture. We don't want to include any of our hard work, any of our drawing in these spaces because we won't be able to see them. Now, luckily, the measuring is all done and we have our room set up. We have the ceiling, which will be up here. We have the floor, which will be down here. We have 2 side walls and then a back wall in the center. Before we start drawing objects in our room, we need to do a little bit of erasing. We can erase all the pencil lines except for the 3 vanishing points. Once that's done and you can clearly see your 3 vanishing points, it's time to start drawing. Let's all start by drawing something on the ceiling. And every time we draw something, we are going to be using the very bottom vanishing point. So I'll start by drawing a couple of skylights in the ceiling, and I need 2 rectangular shapes to draw the 2 skylights. To draw the sides of the windows, I'm going to use the vanishing point. That means I'm going to connect my ruler to that bottom vanishing point and use the top of my ruler to draw the sides of the windows. So there's one side of the window. Let me draw the other side with the ruler connected to the vanishing point. And these lines are going to be perfectly parallel. You're going to have completely matching angles. To draw the tops of the objects on this ceiling, use a horizontal line that matches the angle of the top of the paper. So here I'm drawing the top and bottom of the windows, the skylights, and I am trying my best to have my ruler be perfectly parallel, side by side, matching angles to the top of the paper. Here I go. I'm going to draw my second skylight. For the sides of the windows, I'm going to use the vanishing point. For the top and bottom of the windows, I tried to match the angle of the top of the paper as best as I could. One more thing I'd like to add to the ceiling is a hanging plant. You could add a hanging chandelier, you could add just a normal light fixture, and if something is hanging from the ceiling, you don't need to use the vanishing point. Now I'm done with my ceiling and we're going to work on the floor together. So since we're done with the ceiling, we actually don't need the bottom vanishing point. So just so that I don't get confused, I'm actually going to take a second and erase that vanishing point so I don't use it accidentally. For the floor, we're going to be using the top vanishing point every time we draw the sides of objects. like a rug or a table, they're going to match up with the vanishing point at the top. So right now I'm drawing a very big area rug for the floor, and I'm drawing the sides of the rug. It's a rectangular rug. And so I need to match up my ruler with that top vanishing point. For the tops and bottoms of the objects, like the bottom of this rug and the top of it, I'm going to try to match the angle of the bottom edge of the paper. Also, if you're drawing horizontal side-to-side lines like I am to decorate my striped rug, you're going to match the angle of the bottom of the paper, and as you move closer and closer to the middle of the paper, you're going to make those lines closer and closer together. When I draw some vertical up and down lines for this table to make it look like planks of wood, I used the vanishing point. So use the vanishing point for the sides of the objects on the ceiling and floor, and for any vertical up and down lines. Use the bottom or top edge of the paper to match the angle of any horizontal side-to-side lines or the tops and bottoms of your objects. I'm really excited to see what you include on the floors of your spaces. Once you're all done drawing, you can erase that top vanishing point because we do not need it anymore. For the two walls on each side, we're going to be using the center vanishing point. And the side walls are also a little different because this time you use the vanishing point for the tops and bottoms of your objects. For example, right now I'm drawing 3 big windows to put on the side wall of my room. And since I'm drawing the tops of the windows, I'm matching up my ruler to the vanishing point. When I move on and draw the sides of the windows, like I'm doing right now, I want to be matching the side angles of the paper. So I'm matching up my ruler to be perfectly parallel to the sides of the paper, and then I can draw the sides of my windows. The last thing I need for the windows was the bottom, and for that, I used the vanishing point. Make sure that you put your personal touch on this picture. So if you drew some windows, try to push it even further. What's outside the window? Is it outer space? Is it actually the window into a shark tank? Make sure to put your creative brilliance to use here. And I'm going to use the vanishing point for the tops and bottoms of a couch on the other wall. And then I'm going to use the side of the paper to match the angles of any vertical up and down sides of objects. So I added a couch and I added 2 kitty cat portraits. Just one wall left, the center wall in the back. Now the cool part about drawing on this wall is you don't have to worry about vanishing points. You don't have to worry about parallel lines. All you've got to do is draw something straight on the back wall. Maybe there's a door leading to the outside. Maybe there is a TV. Maybe there's another comfy chair. Maybe there's a big plant. Whatever you want on that back wall that's really in the center of our paper, draw it normally. No vanishing points or paper edges needed. After you're done drawing on all 5 walls of your reverse perspective image, it's time to trace your drawing. And I want to challenge you to use different line weights to do it. We have 2 different sizes of black Sharpie that you can use. We have fine point and we have ultra fine point. I want to challenge you to use both while you are tracing your drawing. I like to use the thicker Sharpie for the outside shape of objects. And then I like to use the thinner Sharpie for the inside shapes. For example, I might trace the outside of the picture frames with the cats in them with a thick Sharpie, and then draw the cats inside with a thin Sharpie. So So as you can see, my whole drawing is traced with both thick Sharpie and thin Sharpie. So I used different line weights and it looks like a really cool picture. Next, we're going to learn how to use watercolor pencils to color it in. When using watercolor pencils, at first they work just like regular colored pencils. You color in each shape, you try to stay in the lines, and you can press harder or lighter to get different values of each color. So I'm going to take a moment here and color in my entire picture, excluding no man's land. I'm going to color each wall. I'm going to color what's outside each window. I'm going to color the couch and the rug. Color everything in with the colored pencils. The magic is coming. After you've completely colored in your entire drawing with watercolor pencils, it's time to activate the paint with a little bit of water. And you'll see immediately, once the watercolor pencils get activated, the color becomes really bright and much smoother of a texture. What you will need is a doggy dish full of clean water with a clean sponge inside and some paintbrushes. And with water alone, dip the paintbrush into the water and brush it lightly onto each color. Now the thing with watercolor pencils is that you need to make sure that you clean the paintbrush using an X on the sponge every time you are activating a new color. And activate one color at a time. I'm going to speed things up and activate this entire picture. Every time I change colors, I am cleaning my brush and I'm making sure only to activate one color at a time. After your watercolor painting is dry, it's time to cut and glue the room to complete the reverse 1-point perspective illusion. What we're going to do is take a pair of scissors and cut on the line that goes from the corner of the paper up to the corner of the back wall and stop. Let's repeat that with the last 3 corners. So I found the corner of the paper and I cut along that diagonal line up until the rectangle and stop. That's all the cutting we'll need to be doing. Next, we're going to do some folding. And we're going to fold up the floor along the bottom edge of the little rectangle and crease. And then each one of the side walls on the lines of the rectangle. And to make sure you've got it, you can check that the corners are matching up with the edges of the paper. And then we'll do the ceiling. After all the walls have been folded, now we're going to work on these triangular no man's land areas. Along the edge of the floor, you're going to fold down that triangular shape right along the line. And then unfold. Now let's move to the next no man's land, this triangular shape. It needs to be folded down towards the table along that line. Then you repeat on the last 2 triangles of no man's land. Once you're done folding those, turn over your paper to the back side, and it'll be much easier now to fold each wall and ceiling of your picture back where it actually needs to fold. So repeat on the same folded lines that you did on the front, but this time on the back. Next, we need to glue the room together. To do this, grab a glue stick, and each one of the triangles of no man's land needs to be glued on the side with the Sharpie on it. So grab each one of those triangles, fold them back towards you so that you can see the Sharpie, and apply the glue. We're going to use these triangles with glue on them to attach each of the walls together in a pop-out formation. So you might need to flip the paper back and forth in order to attach each wall like this. Make sure that the edges of the walls and ceiling match up as best as you can, and one by one, attach and basically build each wall. Wow, this reverse perspective room is already looking really awesome, but there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is to cut off parts of No Man's Land with scissors. What we want to do is match up our scissors to each wall and cut off the triangles that are hanging off. Once you're done, you should have 2 rectangles on each side of the side walls, and your last job is to fold them inwards towards the back on the line that goes along the wall. The reason we want these flaps here is so that we can pin them up for an art show, or you can hang them up at home. We can somehow display these. We could poke a pin through them, or we could put a magnet on them, and then we can display them. And once you're all done with that, you're ready to check out the cool illusion of one-point perspective reversed. If you focus on my picture and concentrate, you can see the optical illusion. Sometimes it looks like you're looking at a 3D paper that's popping out at you like it really is, but sometimes your brain switches it into looking like an empty box, like we're looking down into a room. It's pretty amazing. Can you see it?